Hey guys, we are live here. I am so excited to have you join us live or have you join us in the replay. I'm Kirsten Johnson, and you're watching this in the Elephant Herd. We're here today with Jamie Sivrais, and I'm so excited to have you guys experience him, hear his story, and share his wisdom. He founded the company A Voice for the Innocent. It's a nonprofit that helps give people a place to share their story without shame and fear of judgment. And I just want to thank you so much for giving us this time today to share your story. I'm really excited to have you speak in this interview and in the group.
Thank you. I'm very, very excited to be here.
Cool. I think that particularly what I'm really excited about is the fact that you're a man. And I have received, since I've been doing this just a couple of months, I've received so many messages from men that saying that I was the first person they ever told. And with each one I get, it's like a heartbreak and a cry on my end. And I just feel so honored that I get to hear all these men's stories. And so I am especially thrilled that the men who are silently watching, I feel that they've have been less vocal with me in my little experience. So to have you come and share your story and your healing journey with us, it's like it really means a lot. So with that, I wonder if you can tell us a bit about your story.
Sure. So yeah, and as far as just a comment on what you just said, I've had a lot of men in my life as well that, and I'm 33, but people that I spent either from high school till now with, or met sometime in my early 20s, who all of a sudden, as soon as I came forward, they came forward as well and said like, hey, this happened to me. So, I mean, I definitely recognize that a lot of times men don't tell their story as often, or maybe have just different obstacles that they might have to get around. So, yeah, I was the only child of a single mother, and I was raised. It was just me and her in a house, and I saw my dad sometimes as a young child, but I didn't know him very well, and I asked about him a lot as a young child because he wasn't around a ton, and my mom always just said, hey, your dad loves you very much, but he doesn't know how to be a dad. That's how she left, or just doesn't know how. And so there was a time, and nothing like distinct happened, but where I just didn't see him anymore. We didn't go visit him. He worked at a fast food chain. We wouldn't go visit him there and everything. But again, I was fine at home, and I had questions. My mom always answered them as best she could, but it always came back to he doesn't know how to be a dad. And then I started noticing that other people had dads, or at least adult males, usually living at and obviously now as an adult I can look back and know that statistically it wasn't every kid in my life that had a dad or a stepdad or even mom's boyfriend or partner or whatever. But at the time as a kid, it seemed like I was the only one who only had a mom at home, and I also didn't have siblings, and everyone had siblings, and so I definitely had this sense that my family was different because it was just me and my mom. And so one time I was in later elementary school, and my grandma actually ran into my dad at an department store, put us back in touch, and my mom had a big long talk with him and basically said, if you are coming and saying you're going to be at birthday parties, or if you're going to do this, or if you're going to do that, you have to actually follow through. You have to actually do it. And so he agreed, and we ended up meeting. And I found out, I met his wife, my stepmom, and I found out that they were pregnant with my sister. And I was stoked. And then, a year later, my brother was born, and I had this other family again, and I was starting to feel more normal again. And after time, I started spending every other weekend there, which, a lot of kids of separated parents are probably used to. And I would go over there, and he had started working this paper route where he would go and deliver these papers, and he'd have to go to the warehouse at like 1 a.m. and assemble them, and then, we'd go deliver them. And It was a job that was 7 days a week, no off days, no holidays off. People need their papers, so I would go with him on the weekends that I was there, and we'd get up 1 a.m, go stuff all these papers. And we'd always, as soon as his van was loaded, we'd always drive away, and we'd always stop at the same BP station, and he'd get himself a coffee, and he'd get myself, I said the word coffee as I watched you lift up your mug. That was pretty but I would watch him, or he would get me a French vanilla cappuccino and himself a coffee, and we'd always listen to the same 90s country station. And, it was this routine that I got to know very well. And when we got home, the rest of the house was still asleep. And it was during this time the routine kind of turned sinister, because he would start showing me pornography and start sexually abusing me during those hours when the rest of the house was asleep. And, I was a kid who was pretty educated considering everything about these topics. And my mom always, had talks with me, and she would answer questions for me if I had them, very openly and honestly. And she also got me books that were made for adolescents to describe sexuality and anatomy. And they even had sections on, on harassment and abuse, and even on rape. And, but I didn't recognize my own situation for what it was. I don't know if that's because, probably because it was a parent, I think. I think kids are often taught watch out for strangers, but you're never told watch out for parents, Yeah. And really, a kid shouldn't have to watch out for their parents, is what it comes down to. But, that's the situation I was in. And this went on for about 3 years, and it slowly escalated. And it finally hit a point where I just knew that I couldn't go back there. I couldn't go back to his house. So I was in 8th grade, and we had moved out of the district where I was going to school, and I was finishing my 8th grade year there. So there was a lot of times that I would walk home from school to my best friend's house, and our parents were good friends, and that. And walking, and I was walking to his house, and my mom was going to be picking me up later and taking me to my dad's. And she had told me to call my dad and arrange what time, excuse me, that I was supposed to go over there. And walking home, my best friend was the first person I actually told. And I said, hey, this is happening to me. I don't like it. I don't want to go there anymore. Please don't let me use your phone. I knew that my mom would come and ask about calling my dad. And as long as I just didn't, I knew that I would kind of force myself into telling her. I'd kind of painted myself in a corner, because if I didn't call, she'd want to know why. And so she showed up, and I hadn't called, and she said, "Did you call your dad?" And I said, "No, and I'll tell you why in the car." So finished a short conversation with my friend's mom, and we got out there, and I said, I don't want to go there anymore. He's showing me pornography, and he's touching me in this way and doing this stuff to me, and I don't like it. And she said, "You mean he's been sexually abusing you?" And those words, sexual abuse, was the first time that I thought, oh, I guess that is what this is. And I kind of got a real definition for that word that I knew, but it never came into my mind ahead of time. And from there, she called my dad. And I always like to describe my mom she's 4'10". She's dropped a lot of weight, but at that time, she was about 4'10" wide as well. She was just a round person. And I'm getting pretty round myself, but I'm just, painting a picture. And she, a lot of people, myself included, associate her with Christmas, because she is basically Mrs. Claus. She's just jolly. And now, my mom doesn't even make that much money and still puts up 2 Christmas trees every year, one upstairs and one downstairs, because we do presents downstairs, but there's got to be a tree for the window upstairs. So just goes way overboard for Christmas. And that pretty much sums up her personality all year long. She's very giving, very kind, never in a bad mood. And I saw a switch that day where she called him, and I remember hearing her say, "My son will not be coming to your house anymore because you've been choosing to have sex with him." And she said, you have 24 hours to decide whether you tell your wife or I tell her. And I'm going to put him in counseling, which means they're going to need to file a police report. So I guess we'll see you in court. and all of that happened. And, you know, I don't like strive to give him credit for anything, but if I did, it would be that he didn't try to fight it. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to run from it. He ended up telling his wife. And we went to court, and through, you know, and of course there's so many, you know, so many little details that I'm sure I forgot. There's the, you know, I forget what it's called, but where you have to go in and basically neither parent can be there while the kid is questioned in cases like this. And it can be very difficult because, you know, they're alone, you know, and especially like I don't remember it, and I don't remember if it's because I looked at it as insignificant or really terrible, you know.
Yeah.
But even my mom couldn't be in the room because they don't want the parents present to like sway what the kids say.
Yeah.
And so like everything that she was able to give me a choice about through this whole court case, she did. And to the point that he had his sentencing hearing, and I'd always said I didn't want to go. And she respected that. And then the morning of, I woke up and I guess decided I did want to go. And so she changed her plans around and all that and took me down. And I spoke in front of the judge, and basically, you know, at that time, my third sibling, my stepmom was 9 months pregnant with him. And I guess in 8th grade, even I recognized that my dad was the you know, primary source of income. And if he went to jail, they would have lost their house. And she, you know, she worked a part-time job, but certainly not enough to raise 3 kids, especially a newborn and all that. And I requested that he not go to jail. And, the judge honored that, had some choice words with my dad in front of the courtroom and all this. And, you know, from there, I continued counseling well into high school. And I don't remember a ton of that either. But I feel like with the support that I got from my mom's actions and what she did, and just through counseling, I just was able to always walk away talking about it, you know, as if my car had been broken into. Like it's always just been that simple. Like, oh, this is something that happened to me, you know. And sure that there have been times that I think I see like ramifications of sex abuse in my adult life. But for the most part, I've always felt like I'm in a pretty good spot, and I've been pretty fortunate with that. You know, in that I've always had a lot of support, and I've always, you know, I'm very lucky that I don't really have, you know, a lot of the addiction problems that come with it, you know, and I haven't had a lot of, you know, depression or severe mental health issues. And I'm lucky for that. You know, I'm very fortunate, and I recognize, I think through talking about it so much in high school and in college, and then I'm a musician, so I was always playing in bands and talking about it with people who would then, and it's same thing with you. A lot of times people tell me you're the first person I've ever told. And I recognized that support that I got was not consistent with everyone else, you know. So yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, it kind of brings us up to speed, and I guess because of that, because of hearing all those stories, and you know, girls and women that I would date growing up, it seemed like so many of them had stories, and then even some guys that I knew telling me they had stories, and you know, so many of them said that they just didn't know where to turn, that they didn't know of a place where they could even go. And to be frank, even though I now work at a crisis center, I wouldn't have known. Like if my mom hadn't supported me, I wouldn't have known what to do. And so I thought, like, you know, I was at a music festival in Illinois, and before one of the bands played, are you familiar with To Write Love on Her Arms, the organization? Mm-hmm. Okay, so they are a depression, anxiety, suicide like support system, and they're they're very, very present at lots and lots of music festivals. Very, very, you know, like they sell T-shirts in Hot Topic. You know what I mean? Like, so that kind of crowd, the punk and emo and hardcore alternative, they cater to that group. And that's all where I always was. Those were the bands I played in and the world I was in. And so I saw the founder, his name is Jamie Sivrais. He spoke before one of these bands played. And it wasn't long, and I don't even remember what he said, but I remember thinking, why isn't someone doing that for sex abuse? You know, and
wow.
then, and And then for some reason that switched in my mind to, why aren't you doing that for sex abuse? I was like, I don't know, because I want to be in a band, you know. And that would have been around 2008, 2009. And when I finally decided, okay, this is something I'll do, I created this will date me a little bit, but I created a MySpace page for it. And I created a Twitter account for it. And then I was like, well, I don't know what else to do. I don't, you know, I wanted it to be a website, but I knew I couldn't build a website like I wanted it to be. So it was just a Twitter account that didn't post anything for 3 years, you know. So we actually, A Voice for the Innocent launched in 2012, but if you look at our Twitter, it says like member since 2009, you know, because we haven't done anything. We hadn't done anything those first 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put your website in the comments, and I want to give a reminder to anybody who's out there who, let's see his comment. Okay, did that post? Guys, if you're listening and you're watching out there and you have any questions, we are happy to answer questions as we have time for them. So feel free to chime in with the conversation. We'd love to have you be a part of it. We're doing this for you. So definitely be involved and let us know what's on your mind and how we can, if you want to help us steer the conversation, we're totally open to it. There's so much that I want to say, and I'm just going to focus it down because you brought up so many amazing things. And like for me, like when your mom said, so you've been sexually abused, that's so powerful. I got the chills when I read that. It's like you had a name for it, and it's like almost like I imagine that brings out that I imagine that I even heard that comes, it breaks out of denial, you know. And for me, when my pediatrician had my mom leave the room and asked me if I had been sexually abused when I was 12 because of what was going on with me and what I was saying, and I didn't relate to those words.
Right.
So I said no, and I laughed, and I brought my mom back in and told her what the doctor said, because that was too far of a leap from my little mind of like.
Sure.
So I love that your mom was so supportive, and I didn't tell anybody for years, for a really long time. And I wonder, and then my story does go into addiction, and it does go into anxiety disorders and mental health issues, and it does go into almost dying from all of that. And then now being, you know, I just turned 8 years sober last Friday, so now I'm, you know, going the other direction.
That's awesome.
And thank you. And I wonder, so not only was I didn't tell anyone, when I finally did, like 10 years later, I wasn't believed. And I wonder what your experience has been, because you said that you were supported, and that and I saw in one of your videos, I don't know if it was, I watched you all over YouTube, so Take Back the Night, all the talks that you've done. I went to your website, watched all the YouTube videos. I love it. I love it. You're such a gift to the people who are suffering, and you're offering so much healing and help. I love it. But I wonder what you've noticed in your experience of other people, the relationship between having a voice and shame, like the people who did have a voice and were or were not believed, or the people who never had a voice. And if you've noticed any sort of relationship with shame along with a voice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think so. So kind of a two-part answer. One is one of our volunteers who has been with us. We actually met her at a Take Back the Night. She's wonderful. She was at school at University of Cincinnati, I'm out of Cincinnati, and now she's in Illinois going to grad school, and we miss her dearly. But she, as her senior capstone project at UC, she did a project. It was a big research study on our site as compared to a lot of other like more formal means of sharing your story, whether that's an agency or counseling or things like that. And it was interesting when I read through it because she found that the running theme on our site through so many stories, it was over 100 stories that they analyzed on our site looking for common themes. And the common theme was that they told once before and weren't believed or weren't supported. And I think that's really interesting because we get those stories on our site that come in and you can sense the I think you can just sense where they were, you know, because we do get stories sometimes on our site that are from people who were supported, who feel like they're in a better spot now. And those stories, almost always the last sentence or paragraph say something like, I'm just here to remind you that you can do this. You know what I mean? And it's almost like a sense of like being on the other side of it and not unaffected by it, but having that voice, you know? And so kind of our goal is to get so many people who weren't believed the first time, which is a very common theme on our site, to that point, you know, where they say, hey, you can do this, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, I think that there is especially, so I'm not, you know, this maybe doesn't come to like sexual assault that might happen in college or as an adult, because that certainly has its own packages to unpack and everything. But I think especially with childhood sex abuse, you know, children are so naive about the world, you know, and so especially when it's like a parent or an aunt or uncle or somebody like that who hurts this kid, that's just what the kid knows, you know. And so, I mean, even like you said, like the word sex abuse didn't resonate, you know. And so I think that, like, especially when people aren't supported as a kid, I must have done something wrong. I did, you know, I shouldn't be doing that stuff anyway. I shouldn't be doing it, right? Or I shouldn't have told. I shouldn't have even brought this up because mom, dad, grandma, whoever is angry at me now. You know what I mean? And so it inherently attaches shame right to that, you know? And so I think a lot of times when people, I mean, I think that is almost par for the course, because a kid's not going to be able to have the necessarily experience or the capacity to be like, wait, no, you're wrong. What's happening to me? You know what I mean? Like, like,
I mean,
a kid is told sit down, and then they have to sit down. And if they don't sit down, they're in trouble. Or your bedtime is this. And if you're late to bed, you go to bed earlier tomorrow, or whatever it is. Stop talking. There's a movie playing. Kids are told what to do all the time. So like, and when they push against that, usually there's punishment, whether it's grounding or something totally normal and okay. So if I tell someone, hey, this is happening to me, or I make a comment and I don't get that support, how is a kid supposed to push against that? Because this whole time they've been told, no, I'm the adult, you're the kid, I'm right, you're wrong, you know, I talk, you're quiet, kind of thing. So I mean, that takes me into so many, like, you know, calling our body parts what they are and having those talks with our kids. I mean, it goes so much further into that, you know. If I hurt my elbow or someone grabs my arm the wrong way, I'm able to say as a kid, my arm hurts, you know. But if I don't even have a word for penis or vagina, then, you know, what am I supposed, you know what I mean? So it's body parts, it's anatomy. Let's teach what they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, I went off on a big tangent, but.
No, it's everything's allowed. I think the one thing that I've noticed, and I've read a lot of books about this, I have my own experience, and now I've been talking to a lot of people, it's that the child has to believe that the adult is right in a way, especially if it's a trusted adult or adult that's in the home, whether it's a family member or whether it's just a neighbor or whoever's in the home, because most of it happens in the home, right? 40% of the time. So the kid's mind and my mind goes to, I must be wrong. What I'm feeling is wrong. They have to be right. They need to be right because I'm a kid and I need them to be right. And therefore what I'm feeling is wrong. And then that leads to, I am wrong. Something is wrong with me. Mm-hmm. And then they're living the life of self-betrayal. And so that's what I've seen in my own experience. And with some people that I've talked to, it's living a life, believing, not abandoning yourself from the feelings you have inside, about trusting yourself, believing in yourself, loving yourself, having your feelings, honoring your feelings. And then that path, which is why I'm so passionate about it, because that path goes straight into, well, yeah, alcohol, it feels real good to drink when you have all those feelings that you've never processed, you know. Right. And I think that, like, especially for parents watching, like, what a blessing it is to believe your kid and get them into help right away so they learn how to process those emotions instead of reaching for ways to not feel. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me too, and this might be true for other people, maybe especially males, but I guess this is the first time I thought, not this, but this experience was the first time I'd really reflected back on that. When I first launched A Voice for the Innocent, or was getting ready to, I don't know if you or anyone watching are familiar with Reddit. Go on Reddit, but they do AMAs, Ask Me Anything. And usually it's like, you know, some celebrity with a movie coming out or a new album that wants to talk, or, you know, Barack Obama did one a couple years ago, you know, where users really can post any question and they try to answer them. But sometimes it's just people with interesting life stories, you know. I was the sole survivor of a train crash. Ask me anything, whatever, stuff like that, you know. And so I decided to do one, and it just said, like, I'm a male sex abuse survivor. I'm getting ready to start an organization. Ask me anything. And I just wanted to kind of test the water to see what kind of questions would come. And there were a couple that were obviously intended to be like, you know, anonymous internet maliciousness or whatever, and I didn't care about those. But one person asked, and I took it as an honest question. My friend got really angry because he was watching the whole thing happen. He got angry about the question, but I felt like it was an honest one, because I kind of shared my story of what happened, and then there was a question that said, "Did it feel good?" And I was like, "Huh, yeah." I mean, I was a kid that was getting ready to go through puberty, who was curious, and I was straight, and I'm, you know, curious about girls and women anyway. One of those things where, like, you know, I hope I get to see that R-rated movie because whatever, maybe there's, you know, a boob in there. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, whatever. I was an seventh, eighth grade kid who's already curious about anatomy, and I'm going through puberty, and I've got hormones and all this. And so in a sense, like, I'm being shown all this stuff I'm already curious about, you know. And in that sense, I think that was another thing, is what I didn't want to tell for so long because there was some enjoyment in a sense, you know, and obviously not, I would never ever say like, oh, I enjoyed, you know, what I went through, but there were parts of it that definitely drew me to it, that made me feel like, oh, you can't tell, you'll get in trouble for watching those movies, you know. And so I just didn't. And I didn't necessarily look at it as wrong, as he is wrong, until my mom said sex abuse. You know, I looked at it as, I mean, maybe like, okay, maybe he shouldn't show me that stuff. But, you know, a friend at school might show me a magazine he stole from his parents. That's, in my mind, those were kind of equal. You know what I mean? Where it just obviously wasn't. So it was always something that I thought I would be in trouble for. And I, you know, not to mention, because I had that history with my mom, I grew up with my mom. So if she told me to get off, you know, Nintendo or go to bed or whatever, I had no problem pushing back on that, you know, because your kids are supposed to figure out their boundaries, you know. And so I had no problem saying, can I have 5 more minutes? You know, can I go to, my bedtime's too early, this is stupid. I could make comments like that, and see how, you know, if it worked or not. With my dad, I just didn't have that base. He was not abusive in other ways. He wasn't verbally or physically abusive. But if I asked, can I get on Nintendo? And he said no, that was just the answer. I didn't know how to push back. So certainly, even if at any time throughout the abuse I had wanted to say no, I wouldn't have known how. I just didn't know how. You know, this is what we did, you know. And it's that power dynamic, that parents right, kids wrong, and that's just how it was. So yeah, at this point, I don't even remember the question. And if I answered it, I hope I did.
Yeah, how was it getting to the point where you talked publicly about that this is what happened and your father did it? So now you're saying that how was that for you, saying that instead of saying someone did it to me, and saying that my father did it to me? What was the process you went through with that?
I think so. That was always just part of my story anyway. So if I was one-on-one, anyone would know that, you know, anyone would know that it was my dad that because I would just tell them that. But, you know, it wasn't as if I shouted from the rooftops about my story or anything like that. I just would tell people if it came up on one-on-one or whatever situations. And so I never felt any kind of like sense of betrayal or anything because, my dad was a consistent part of my life for a total of 4 years, and he abused me for 3 of them. So like, there definitely wasn't betrayal. I will say that there was a moment when I first decided to announce that I was doing A Voice for the Innocent, when we decided like, hey, this is actually something we can do. I posted my story for the first time, and it's probably still on my Facebook somewhere because I posted it as a note, and in that moment, there was definitely a sense of like, all right, about to hit that button, no turning back. Definitely a sense of like nervousness and anxiety, and and at that time, I had never even heard the term rape culture. I had never heard the word triggered. There was so much I just didn't know then. So for me, it was just like, I never thought about, oh, is this going to affect anyone else on my news feed? For me, it was just like, this is the next step of my life that I'm going to share. And if I have to do this part of my life, I have to be used to talking about my story publicly. And so there was, some sense of anxiety there. The other sense of like, that I might have had of apprehension was, as of this year, my siblings are all adults. And so my youngest brother just graduated high school this past year and is in college now. And so 5 years ago, he was entering high school, but I still had 2 adult siblings. And my stepmom at that time was still married to my dad. And I very much love and respect her. And I didn't want to, we don't share a last name. So that was part of the thing that was okay. They're my half siblings, they're my dad's kids, but I'm from my mom and I have my mom's last name. So I did let them know ahead of time, like, hey, I'm going to be doing this and, feel like I have to do it. I'm going to be talking publicly about my story. This isn't to make you uncomfortable. It's because of this. And that's a whole different other side of my story, is the relationship with my siblings. But, they have, for the most part, been really supportive of not only me, but of Voice for the Innocent. We don't talk about it a ton, from what they say. He never abused any of them. So, and I'm not the kind of person that's going to be like, you have to pick me or him. I would never do that. That's their dad. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, they know what happened. They've never tried to deny it. They've never tried to tell me how I should feel about it. And because of the respect they've always given me, when I said like, hey, I'm creating this organization and I'm not going to be quiet about my story, I don't typically name my dad. In fact, I don't think I have in 6 years. And I certainly don't name them. But if somebody knew his name, he is on the sex offender registry, and they could potentially link him to them, I guess. But I didn't want them to feel like they had to be part of something. Like, I wasn't trying to uproot the family. I was trying to reach out to other people. So, and that, in a sense, I did want to give them the opportunity to say like, okay, but I'd prefer if you don't even mention you have siblings or something like that. They didn't. They didn't really say much about it at all. But I always try to at least respect those relationships because they can't control obviously what our father did, and they're not my father. We have a much different relationship with all them. So.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to, and anybody who's watching, feel free to ask a question if you have any questions or anything that you want to know. We'd be excited to hear from you and see if we can get an answer for you right now live. And if you're watching on the replay, also put your question in. We'll see if we can join you in the comments after, whenever you are actually watching. I wanted to, how can people use A Voice for the Innocent for their own healing? What is, I guess, you talked about why you started A Voice for the Innocent, but who does it serve, and how can the people watching be served through, if they go to your website, how can it help in their healing process? I want to send them there. So.
Sure. Yeah. So our website is, when you go, you sign up for it with just an email. If you're not comfortable using your own email, obviously you can make a fake one, at Google or Hotmail or whatever. The only thing required of you is you pick a username, you pick a password, and you choose an email. just to keep out bots, and from there, like you pick your username, it's totally anonymous. You don't have to tell us a thing about you, but you're able to anonymously share your story. So if you have people in your group who are maybe interested in the cause because of something they've never told, I know one of the things we've heard from some of our volunteers is that Facebook feels a little too personal because you can attach, a story to a name and a face and family photos and everything else. And so our site is anonymous. We have, tons of volunteers who respond to stories, and, their sole purpose is to hear you and to support you. And recognize that you might be feeling anger, you might be feeling sadness, you might be feeling nothing, and that all that's okay, and that they're all ready to talk to you regardless. From there, we're developing more of a community sense on our website, and that's not quite there yet. We're hoping by the end of the year to launch kind of this whole new thing. But we also have a database of national resources, as well as throughout. I don't know if they're on the site yet, but we have a database of Canadian resources as well for all the provinces and territories there. But so if you're wondering, like, is there any kind of agency around? We can help you find that. We can help you find the closest agency to you. If you're looking for something more, more particular, like a counselor or, legal help, or, an attorney that specializes in civil cases for people who are childhood sex abuse victims, whatever, email us. We're happy to help you find that. Our site doesn't strive to be any kind of replacement for counseling. We're strong advocates for counseling. But if counseling feels a little too clinical, or you have a very busy schedule, or you're just not ready to start counseling yet, you want to get used to sharing your story, that's what we say our site's for. And comments are moderated, so you're not gonna, we do that on purpose because I've literally never had anybody leaving malicious comments anyway. But I think sometimes there have been some comments that we've had to not approve just because a person, I think, might be coming from a good spot, but they say something that doesn't sound as supportive. And again, it's not anyone being malicious. One of the things we hear so much is people don't quite know what to say. If they've not been affected by sexual violence, someone shares their story, they don't know what to say. They don't know how to respond, or they don't want to say the wrong thing. And so it's actually one of the big courses we give on like college campuses, and that is how to respond. So if anonymity is something you strive for or look for, and being able to tell part of your story, we're there for you. And even if you've told your story a million times and you just want to offer that support to other people who read our site, you're welcome there as well.
Okay, cool. So you guys, voicefortheinnocent.org, go there and tell your story. The reason why I called this group the Elephant Herd, and why that's the name of my mission, is because, and it's the HEARD. So hearing, it's the elephant. Because my experience was that, like, I had all these anxiety disorders, and then I go to rehab for drinking, and I have all this stuff going on, but like I even write a book, and then I don't realize that the reason why my relationships aren't working, the reason why I'm having all this anxiety and all this stuff, is because I have all this shame underneath that I've never processed. I've never addressed my elephant. There's an elephant in the story, elephant in the room, right? It's the elephant in the story. It's the elephant that's blocking my life. And I what came to me was the first step in healing from this is to have your elephant heard. To hear other people's elephants, like they do in 12-step communities, you identify through story. So to hear people's elephants, and then to have your elephant heard. And so that's why I named it the Elephant Herd. And I get the bit about anonymity, and that people might not want to type in a group like the group that I created on Facebook, what their story is. And that's why I love what you've done. And that's why what I was so excited to talk to you too, is because it's such a valuable resource for people out there who haven't, like, if you haven't ever shared your story, and you don't have someone that you can, a trusted friend right now at the moment that you can think of, definitely go to Jamie's website, voicefortheinnocent.org, and be heard. Get your elephant heard. Start the healing journey. Shame lives in secrecy. Shame cannot survive the secrecy. Like, once we start talking about things, like in the way that I've been able to come in my own journey, okay talking about my anxiety disorders, which I was never going to tell anybody, right? Because I had shame around that, or around my drinking, or even now around childhood sexual abuse. I don't take it personally anymore because I've told my story. So now this is what happens to a human in these circumstances. It's not like it's about me anymore. It's
Right.
This is part of what happens to a human nervous system that's been traumatized. This is how and it hasn't been looked at ever. This is so it's untreated childhood sexual abuse, and this is what it looks like. So,
trauma-informed care is something at my work that we focus so much on it because of the way that these experiences can affect a child growing up, and it literally, like, I was so blown away at the science behind it, but different traumas that a child faces literally turns into things like heart disease, diabetes. It has physical manifestations of childhood things, and there's science behind that about the way that our brains literally rewire and as defense mechanisms almost. But yeah, it's really what you said is definitely true. I mean, this isn't about how I reacted. It's about how humans react,
Yeah, I heard Obama say something a couple of years ago. I watched it recently because I've been watching everything recently once I realized about the elephant stuff, elephant in my story, that it affects everybody because it's about the potential that is stolen from everybody who is left silent. Because if we're silently suffering, it's then, I mean, I was trained to not believe in myself. That's what, as a kid, it's like I must be wrong. So what does a life look like of all these people, of 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men, or whatever the stats are, and that's probably even underestimated, of people who aren't believing in themselves, and all this potential that we're missing out on these people. We don't get to know them. They're not living these bright, vibrant lives. They're suffering in silence and shame. And it's so yeah, I love what you're doing.
Thank you. Likewise.
And I saw something that I saw, I'm just reading my notes here. I love the video you made about how everyone's welcome on your site. Everyone's welcome. And it's like, even if you this, you're welcome. Even if you this, you're welcome. It was one of your videos on YouTube. And it said, even if what happened to you wasn't as bad as what you think happened to other people, you're welcome. And I want to talk about that for a minute, because I think, like, for me, because I don't know how to say this, like, without using anatomy parts, because there was no penis involved when I was a kid, like, I didn't think it was bad enough that I could actually say something in order to get out of the circumstances to stop it.
Sure.
I was definitely traumatized, and there was definitely years of the consequences and all that I was going through. But I, in my little kid mind, didn't think it was bad enough to actually, like, well, it's not this thing because it doesn't involve this extreme circumstance. Right. And so I love that it's that you promote that no matter what's happened to you. Because even for me, I was touched, but it's even if you're not touched, that it is sexual abuse. Even if even if you're shown sexual material, if you're sexualized as a kid, if you're shown pornography and not touched, that still is sexual abuse. Yeah. And I love that you promote that through your website.
Yeah, again, going back to Reddit, there's a subreddit that I subscribe to that I wish had a little more activity, because what I hate seeing the most, or hate knowing about, is, I guess not the most, but I really, really can't stand it, is when somebody finally decides to type up their story and post it and there's no responses. It just breaks my heart. You know what I mean? Like, just knowing that somebody put the time, decided to hit post, and usually, at least on Reddit, not so much on avoiceoftheinnocent.org, but on Reddit, a lot of times people are saying, how do I cope? How do I, actively looking for answers, and they don't always get. Sometimes there are, but it's just not one of the subreddits that's frequented as much. And a person came on, and I think she was a lady, but she said, I was assaulted, but I was drunk, and I don't know what kind of consent I gave, if any. She was talking about some of the ways that it has affected her in her sex life now, and which is basically eliminated it. She's like, I just have no interest. She's like, but even at times that I'm not thinking about that night, I still have no interest, and she was like, there's a support group in my neighborhood that I would love to go to, But her metaphor was, she said, I feel like I'm going to a group of people with broken legs and all I've done is stub my toe, you know? And I thought it was such an interesting, and I was like, look, like, I respond to messages, I respond to stories on the Voice of the Innocent. I think for self-care reasons, sometimes we have to draw lines. So I typically don't respond on Reddit also, just because I work in violence prevention, then I do a Voice for the Innocent stuff, and sometimes I have to say, like, no, I'm going to play Madden on my phone and disconnect, you know. But this one stuck out to me because I think that one, you know, in my personal story, I was never ever forced to do anything to him. It was all stuff that was done to me. And I guess in a conventional sense, it was nothing that hurt, you know. I wasn't raped. I guess in the traditional sense, it was all stuff that was done to me. And so, yeah, I mean, I've definitely even had that sense before too, because certainly there are boys and girls that do get raped, and it's very painful and in a sense more traumatizing than what I experienced. But I still had to heal from what I experienced. And if you do have a stubbed toe, it doesn't matter how many broken legs exist in the world, your stubbed toe still needs to heal, you know? And I think like that's the perspective we have. We hear that on our site too. Sometimes people come on and they say, I almost didn't post because my story is nowhere near as bad, you know?
Yeah.
But we're all living our own lives. And I want people who have experienced incredibly traumatic things to heal, just like I want people who feel like their experience wasn't as traumatic. I want them to heal. And it, you know, they don't have much to do with each other. You know what I mean? Like if I have a stubbed toe, I want everyone who has a broken leg to heal, but it has no bearing on my stubbed toe. You know what I mean? So I think that's the, you know, even small experiences, you know, need a place to be heard.
And not only with that, what?
I say small experiences, no experience is small. I'm just saying we really encourage people to not compare stories, you know, because it's not the same, you know. They're not. It's not. There's no way to compare. Just no good comes from it, you know.
Yeah. And a stubbed toe to one person might feel more traumatic than a broken leg to somebody else, because everybody's different and has a different experience, a different nervous system, a different experience. And what I want to say too is about the re-victimization piece. So if what happened to me was a stubbed toe when I was, you know, 10 to 13, those 3 years, well, I sure did break a leg later on, because I sure did learn to not trust myself and I got set up to be re-victimized because of my stubbed toe. I was then insecure walking, and then I did break my leg a couple of times later. So the not getting treated for the stubbed toe, the re-victimization stats are like awful.
Oh yeah.
You know, because you don't trust yourself, then you go into this warped place where they wouldn't be doing this. I mean, it's the same language I use as a kid, I use as an adult, that this person wouldn't be doing this because of who they are in my life, and like this wouldn't be happening. I must be wrong. It's that same little traumatized voice goes to a place of dissociating or freezing. For me, what happened is my nervous system got used to freezing during the trauma. So then as an adult, now I'm freezing. Now I really can't protect myself. And then I'm trying to play it off or not talk about it. So the stubbed toe can lead very easily, and often does. I think you're 3 times more likely to be, or I don't know the stats right now, but it can lead to a broken leg. So
yeah, I definitely think that's, you know, especially true for women. And like I said, I think sharing stories and opening up about these things, I think that males and females both have their own kind of sets of obstacles to go through. And maybe as a male, you know, I don't have as high of victimization rates or re-victimization rates, you know, but I also know that because less males talk about these kinds of things, it's so much, I don't want to say harder. It's not harder, I think, for anybody than another person, but it just creates challenges, you know. And, you know, I know one of the big things for me is having to, my worry is that having told my story and having it something that's out there, are there people who think that now I'm prone to become an abuser myself? You know? And I think that's a kind of a misconception anyway. Yes, many abusers have been abused in their past. But I heard a study recently, actually on a podcast I listened to. There was a psychiatrist on there talking, and like less than 5% of people who are abused go on then to abuse. But it's this whole misconception about like, oh, you were abused, now you're going to abuse. And honestly, I don't think anyone's ever said that to me. But it's just this obstacle that I have, and I think also, and honestly, like I see absolutely nothing wrong with people's sexualities, but for some reason, I think, especially as a kid, like we're taught in school that gay is an insult. So if I've been sexually abused by another guy, that makes me question my own sexuality, and now as an adult with more confidence, I can look back and I can tell my kid like, hey, like if you end up realizing you're gay, that's okay. You're still just as loved. As a kid, I didn't have that experience. I just thought like, oh, they're gonna think I'm gay, and that might be a bad thing. You know what I mean? And again, I think that that's probably an obstacle for a lot of people, especially people who, like, I know a lot of times the people who question or who are maybe torn on homosexuality, maybe think that it's even wrong. A lot of times that comes from a place of religious teachings and beliefs and things like that. And so if I'm a person who thinks that's wrong, but now I'm questioning my own, you know what I mean? Now again, I think there's many layers with that that I might disagree with. However, if I think that that's wrong and now I'm worried that that's me, what is that? I mean, just the amount of uncertainty that someone might go through. But then again, as a male, I don't typically fear walking down the street alone. I don't get catcalled. I don't face workplace harassment in the same way that women do. So like, I think that it's definitely its own can of worms. And I guess the only reason I say that, I think it's important to recognize the struggles for that different people have.
Yeah.
No one has once ever asked me what I was wearing when I was abused. You know what I mean? And that's a difference that women, it should never be asked, period, because obviously it doesn't matter. But, women are typically asked that more than men, and that's a challenge. It's a hard thing.
Yeah. How was it your fault? What were you drinking? What were you wearing?
Right. Yeah. Why were you at that party in the first place? Yeah. I mean, all these things, I just think that men are asked those questions less. But you know what I mean? That's definitely, I think, more of an obstacle women face. I just think it's important to recognize like that men and women are going to have different obstacles, and therefore we can help break down those obstacles better, knowing what someone might be experiencing.
Yeah.
Personally. Speaking
of parties, I am so inspired and so impressed with what you've done, your outreach at concerts, that you brought the conversation of healing and getting free from the trauma of childhood sexual abuse out into venues that we normally traditionally don't see it in. Like I think it's more common to hear about something and doing it on a college campus, bringing a booth there and talking about it. But you're bringing the conversation into places where typically that conversation doesn't already exist, where there actually might be a higher percentage or probability that someone in that venue might actually have had that experience. Yeah. And I want to know, first of all, that's amazing. Like, I just want to acknowledge that you're doing that and how cool that is, how innovative. And I love that you're thinking out of the box, but how can I don't know what you're thinking, but I imagine that you're able to reach new people. And I think that that's amazing that you're doing that. And it's wonderful. Like when I saw that, I'm like, this is really, really cool. And that you guys go on tour and stuff. So I would love if you would share with us a little bit about what that's been like, and what you found from bringing this conversation to a non-traditional venue. What that's been like for you. Sure. So the biggest adventure that we've done is Vans Warped Tour. And if you might be watching and not quite certain what it is, it's been around the largest and longest music festival in North America. So we just did year 23. And it is
anywhere between 70 and 90 bands, over 800 crew members, all just traveling for about 2 months. This year was 39 shows. Last year was 41 shows. And with the off days, it usually is about a 55-day tour. And it hit 30 states this year, and last year. So this was always, it's a big punk rock, tour, and it branches out into other genres of music too. But for me, this was where this was my world anyway. This is, the world I existed in. I went to Warped Tour a ton as a fan when I was a kid. My very first one was in 2000. My mom drove me 4 hours north to Cleveland because it didn't even come to my city yet. But, I always went to Warped Tour. All the bands that were on Warped Tour were always my favorites. And it kind of fell into our lap the way it happened because there was an artist on, and, artists and musicians a lot of times have a bad reputation, and a lot of times that comes from very real and understandable places. And there was one artist who was 19 years old and all of a sudden was famous, at least in this world, and used that to his advantage to send and receive pictures from underage girls. And so because he was an artist on Warped Tour, the tour as a whole came under a lot of fire. And basically the founder of Warped Tour tweeted out a message that said, all right, we want to make sure this is addressed. Who's an organization that deals with this? And we tweeted that. I don't even think we did. A friend of ours at the time, who now is on our board, but she tweeted at and said, you should look at this organization. And so in 2015, we went out and met with them and did like 11 dates just around Cincinnati, like within 4 or 5 hours of Cincinnati. And the next year, he funded us to go out on the tour as a whole. And we did it again this year. And it's exciting and it's hard work, especially because, it's 12-hour days. It's very physical. It's very, very hot. It's an outdoor festival. So you're braving all the elements. In Charlotte, North Carolina this year, there was an incredibly bad storm that broke about half the tents that people had. Wow. Luckily not ours, but just destroyed them. I looked up and saw a tent 20 feet in the air. I mean, it was insane. And, 90 bands and 7 stages, and it's all set up and broken down in one day. So the amount of people and stuff and everything is insane. But Warped Tour is kind of known for its philanthropy. And so they have, I think, about 20 nonprofits that travel with them. And then different nonprofits set up every day in whatever city they might be in. And I think this year they were over 100 nonprofits total that came and set up. And the cool thing is, that world is a little different, I think, than a lot of like country or top 40 or stuff in that. More so than other genres, I just think that people tend to connect with the musicians in this place, and the lyrics are usually sung about very, very real and open and vulnerable things. Typically, the songs in these things are not about just a party on a Friday night or a breakup, but they're singing about facing your addiction or ending depression or even political stuff. But it's usually songs that mean something. There are breakup songs, sure, but usually these bands are singing about very, very open and real and raw things so that the listeners therefore connect with them, And then when you have these bands that are singing about these issues, younger people take them seriously. I mean, like the median age at Warped Tour is probably 15 or 16, but all of a sudden you have all these high school kids who want to run into Right Love on Arms, who I mentioned before. They want to know more about us, or Hope for the Day, which is another depression, suicide awareness, or Heart Support, which is a Christian-based support group, or, there's so many nonprofits. Plus, there's Keep Abreast, which is a breast cancer awareness and screening tent. Last year, before the 2016 election, there was a group called Headcount, and they were just signing kids up to vote. They were nonpartisan. They didn't care who you voted for. They were just trying to get kids involved. So, so many versions of nonprofits, different examples. There are 3 different animal rights nonprofits. PETA's one of them out there, and, say what you will about PETA, they were there, every single day, and they've been for a long time. So typically, fans that are going to Warped Tour have a much much larger interest in nonprofits and causes and things like that they can be a part of. So it's not as odd that we're at Warped Tour as it might seem, but we've done those places where it is kind of odd, where you go and you're not used to seeing a sex abuse group here, and what are you doing? I think about one of our very first fundraisers we ever did. We were friends. My wife went to school with a girl who is now she's like district manager, but at the time she was a general manager at a Wendy's. And she was like, oh, we do these things called, I think they're called burger bashes. And it's like from 4 to 8 on a Wednesday night, we give 10% of sales to one nonprofit and try to get some people out also, you know. And it's usually for like a school football team or, you know what I mean? And so she was like, yeah, feel free to come and set up a table. And like being in a Wendy's with a table that said like, hey, we're here to support people who've been affected by rape and sex abuse. And also it being one of our first events, like it was just like, gosh, I came in here to get a Frosty, not to see this table. You know what I mean? Like I didn't expect to see this.
Yeah.
Or we get, I've felt we've done comic conventions as well. You know, so people are there to meet their favorite character from a movie and the actors there, and then to buy some comics at one of the booths or some toys or some artwork, and then there's a sex abuse table. You know, and you know, every single time I've ever felt any kind of like nervousness or apprehension, but the positive thing is it's always laid to rest, because we had most of the time it's people who it's one of the 1 in 3, right, or one of the 1 in 6 who come up and maybe say, I didn't expect to see you guys here, but I'm so glad you are. You know, it's always followed with that. We've gotten one comment in the 6 years that I can remember about, you know, why are they here or something like that, and it was from this one guy, and he was wearing a really, really distasteful shirt anyway, that made light of school shootings, and he made a comment about why are they here while the girl he was with bought a shirt from us. So wow. Like, you know, and he didn't even confront us. Like, we don't really get that confrontation type stuff. I guess one person said something to one of our volunteers at Warped Tour this year, but I wasn't there to hear it. But he said something about we're creating more victims because we're perpetuating a victim mentality or something. I don't agree with that. I think I could debate our philosophies with anyone and tell people why we do what we do. But I think that for the most part, I mean, like, this is an issue people do care about, you know, and I tend to think that a lot of times things on the internet will make you think that nobody cares about anything, because the internet can be a really gross place. But when you're face-to-face talking with people and actually interacting with people in real life, I think it's a lot different. You know, things get played up online and in the news and everything. But I think people really do care about this issue. And maybe not everyone knows how to talk about it. Well, definitely not everyone knows how to talk about it, you know. And some people just aren't comfortable talking about it. And, you know, it's an issue. Sex in and of itself is a taboo topic. So then we put the crime aspect behind it, and it's even harder to talk about. There's not many issues that are like that, you know. I can be at a dinner with people I don't know and say, you know, and this didn't happen, but if this did happen, I can say, you know, my mom had cancer 10 years ago. And people might say, I'm really sorry to hear that, but it doesn't drain the life out of whatever conversation I'm in. You know what I mean? Whereas if I say I was a sex abuse victim as a kid, that has to be the right group in the right setting to say that, or at least a lot of people feel like it. I've said it at dinner parties before, and, you know, people say, why'd you start a Voice for the Innocent? Oh, I was abused as a kid. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And then you're able to move on. But I just think that it's a taboo topic, and people don't like to talk about it. They certainly don't like to be the one to bring it up. And so therefore, when we're at a lot of, you know, places where it's unconventional to see us, you get a little nervous, you know. I did have one guy tell me at a small family festival that that kind of stuff doesn't happen in his neighborhood. And I was like, it does, though. It does. You know what I mean? Like, I know people from your neighborhood that this has happened to. You know, that's not helping anybody to say it doesn't happen here. But yeah, again, it wasn't aggressive. It was just kind of like, you're wasting your time here. That doesn't happen, kind of thing. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing to go take a taboo topic and set up a booth around it at a Wendy's. You know, but, you know, We keep doing it. We learn.
Well, I think you're a hero and an angel and a gift for the community, and you're helping so many people with your courage and your willingness and openness to share your story and to set these booths up. And hey, you want a Frosty? And let me tell you about this, childhood abuse. And yeah, I think you're a gift to the world, and we're lucky to have you and your bravery reach out as much as you do. And so I just want to acknowledge you for that. I think it's wonderful what you're doing, and that even though you're facing some adversity, internal and external, that you just keep going, and that you're really clear that you're here to help people in this way. And it's wonderful. And so I think it's amazing. And I want to know if we can either wrap up right now, or if there's something else you wanted to add. We have already talked about a way to reach you, or the website is avoicefortheinnocent.org if people want to share their story or read other stories. Is there anything else you want to say before we close?
If you're not necessarily ready to share a story, but you want to see just a little bit more of what we're about, we are on Facebook, just Voice for the Innocent on Facebook. Twitter and Instagram is just at AVFTI.
Okay, wait, so I'm gonna write your Twitter right here. So at AVTFI.
AVFTI.
Oh yeah, a voice for the innocent.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's your Twitter handle, a voice for the innocent, and then I'll link your Facebook below in the comments so people can click over and like you, and then follow you guys on there too.
Awesome. Yeah, and I just kind of nodded. You said some very kind things about me, and I really appreciate that, and I think the same of you, and it's not always easy work, but I think that it's incredibly admirable. Your name's far more creative than mine. You have a much better name for your group than I do for mine, but it is what it is. I think we get mistaken a lot for pro-life groups. And we're just always like, that's just not even the conversation we're here to have, so yeah, it's interesting, but
yeah, and it is. I mean, we're aligned on the same way, where it's about sharing your story. It's about it's not keeping it inside, not suffering in silence.
Right.
Having a voice, being heard. Yeah, it's the first step of many. Absolutely. One thing I want to, if we have a moment for this, if you have a couple more minutes, what has been the most helpful in your own healing journey, specifically? Meditation, something that has been transformative for me, learning how to be with myself and my feelings and then process them. What was key for you in working through your trauma with this abuse?
Well, I think, so again, I have a two-part answer because I'm long-winded, I guess, but I think my first thing was just confronting it head on, and writing a lot of music about it, writing about the broken relationship with my father, whether it was music or just lyrics or poetry or none of the above, just literal words or letters or whatever. Confronting it and being able to release it in a way that made sense for me, I think. It would never have made sense for me to paint pictures or anything like that because I'm not an artist in that way. But for some people it might have, maybe painting or drawing, or some people are able. I know a lady who she worked for the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. She's very open about her story as well. And she runs, and her running is her therapy. And she loves being on a journey to fitness. And she's she was always a fairly fit person anyway. And just watched her become this literal warrior, and she loves it. Yoga and things make sense for a lot of people too. For me, it was being able to both literally and in a more of an artistic or metaphorical way describe the things I dealt with. I wrote a song at one point called "After Tonight," and because I went through a phase for a while in my life where I felt like sex was something I needed to have, and I likened it to a prescription, and being able to do stuff like that and look at things in my own life as a means to cope was what had helped me the most. And I never, ever in a million years thought that I would have found anything else that was more than that. But being able to watch somebody come to our site for the very first time under an anonymous name and then reveal themselves and then deciding to share their story publicly, which I've seen several times now, people end up sharing their story publicly, you know. And one of my friends came and shared her story really without me knowing it, and then decided to, we used to do a storyteller speak out event, and so then decided to tell a story to a small audience there, and then told it on her Facebook, and then joined our board and was this huge champion for it, you know. And knowing that I had some small part in that, you know, of helping to empower others who were on similar journeys to me. I think that has been, you know, it was enough to make me drop pursuing music seriously, because you know, it was like this is what makes sense to me now. And you know, for people that know me, I'm not always the most positive person. I'm not always, you know, I call myself a realist, but that probably steps into pessimism a whole lot. But I think that, I mean, that's literally what keeps me charged, is being able to have some small part in encouraging others with the same thing I went through, and helping them get through that. I always say I created the voice for the innocent I created the voice for the innocent for other people, but it's helped me the most, you know. And just knowing that, like, little things I would have never ever thought to even talk with someone about, like the dynamic with my siblings, or, you know, different things, just different things that I encounter in my own story, or not wanting to go to events where I know my siblings, all three. Well, I have 4 siblings. My 3 that were kind of the main part of the story there. All 3 of them spoke at their high school graduation. My sister was valedictorian. My brother was either salutatorian or class president. I don't remember. And then my youngest brother was class president and spoke. And I missed all of them except for my youngest brother, because I finally, at 33 years old, decided, you know what, I can face my dad there if I have to. And it wasn't easy, and there was a ton of anxiety around it. But it was still a decision that I had to make, that I didn't take lightly. And knowing that there are people that are directly around me who, yeah, we can talk about the latest movie, but we can also talk about, hey, I'm really struggling with this, you know. And knowing that people have dealt with the same thing, and yeah, I hear, just know it, just that's it, you know. Knowing that other people have dealt with it. Maybe they have advice, maybe they don't, but just hearing that validation of, like, oh yeah, that sucks, you know, good luck with that. We'll talk to you on the other side of that. It's been crazy, you know. So I'm not necessarily saying, oh, go out and start an organization, because that's not necessarily feasible for everybody. But if there's a way that people are able to help other people, you know, yeah, I think that's been the most significant, like, softening of my heart, I suppose, you know, because yeah, I just didn't, I don't think I expected that. I kind of went into it saying, like, I'm at this spot and you can be here too and let me help. And then I realized, like, sure, I'm far enough in my journey, but I also have plenty of things that I can work on. And this organization has kind of been like, here, let me show you all those things, you know, and then actually help. So it's been kind of neat. I mean, helping other people has been the number one reason why I'm, you know, why I'm doing well.
I love that. The softening of the heart, all the humility I hear. I love it. Yeah. Thank you so much for today, for sharing your message with us, for your courage, for your authenticity, and for bringing the message around the world in a new way, opening the conversation in a new way. It's so powerful. And everybody, if you have not shared your story yet and you're feeling like you are ready for a healing and you are to begin your healing journey or take it to the next step, and you want to have your story heard or you want to share it, go to avoicefortheinnocent.org, register. You can use a fake name, right? An anonymous name. They can make up a name.
Yeah, they make up their own username.
Yeah, and just get heard, get your story out there, join the community and start your healing process. You're not alone. A lot of us have been through this. In fact, some estimates say it's a third of Americans have some sort of sexual trauma as a part of their story. From the stub toe to the broken leg. So wherever you're at, whatever has happened to you, you are absolutely worth healing. You are absolutely worth loving yourself and believing in yourself and rocking the F out in life. So
Right.
I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Jamie. And I will go ahead and end the broadcast. All right.
It's been a pleasure.
Bye, guys.